Welcome to Deep Dive. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's dive in and grow together.
Welcome to this deep dive. We are going to explore a really pivotal moment in history, the end of the British Raj and the birth of India and Pakistan. And for this, we'll be using Freedom at Midnight by Larry Collins and Dominique Lapierre. It's a book that's just really great at immersing you in the characters and the events of this really turbulent period.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes Freedom at Midnight so compelling. It's this ability to really weave together the grand sweep of history with these intimate stories of the people who lived through it. So, we're not just talking about these abstract forces. We're talking about real people making decisions, life-altering decisions against, this backdrop of immense change.
Yeah, and it really sets the stage for this incredible story, especially when you consider the state of Britain after World War II. Imagine a nation exhausted, grappling with rationing, economic hardship. The empire, once a symbol of global power, now facing its own decline. And this context is crucial for understanding why the decision to grant India its independence, a jewel in the crown of that empire, was made.
Yeah, absolutely. The economic realities of post-war Britain really did play a significant role. Maintaining such a vast empire was just unsustainable, both financially and, in terms of political will. But it wasn't just about economic.
Right.
The rising tide of nationalism within India itself, fueled by figures like Mahatma Gandhi, was just impossible to ignore.
And this is where things get really fascinating. Gandhi, this unassuming figure, challenged the might of the British Empire with his unique approach. Nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience. And it was something that just really captured global attention. And, it forced the world to kind of confront the moral inconsistencies of colonialism. Think about the impact of events like the Salt March, where thousands marched to the sea in defiance of British salt taxes, and they produced their own salt as a symbol of resistance.
Yeah, Gandhi's methods, which, initially seemed baffling to the British, they proved incredibly effective. And he became this symbol of hope, not just for India, but for oppressed people worldwide. But as Freedom at Midnight reveals the path to independence, it was far from straightforward. It was riddled with internal conflicts, power struggles, and ultimately, the tragedy of partition.
Yeah, and that's where the key players in this drama come into focus. Yeah. We're talking about these larger-than-life individuals who really shaped the destiny of an entire subcontinent.
Right. Each of these figures brought their own motivations, ambitions, and complexities to the table. And, understanding them is really key to unlocking this whole story.
So let's start with Lord Mountbatten, the last viceroy of India. He was given this, monumental task of overseeing this transition to independence. And he brought a unique set of skills to the job. A war hero, a royal, a master negotiator. He used both his charm and his authority to kind of navigate this incredibly complex situation.
And he really arrived with this idea of a smooth and graceful transfer of power, almost like a carefully choreographed dance. And he was very aware of the need to preserve British prestige even as the empire was being dismantled. But what he encountered was a situation far more volatile and chaotic than I think he could have ever anticipated.
He had to contend with these mounting communal tensions, political maneuvering between different factions, the looming threat of violence.
Yeah, the book describes how he tried to use his charm, his diplomatic skills to try and bridge divides and, forge compromises. He held these lavish parties. He engaged in these one-on-one conversations with key leaders. He even tried to appeal to their sense of, history and shared heritage. But as events unfolded, it became clear that the situation was spiraling out of control.
Next, we have Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister. And he was this incredibly charismatic and intellectually gifted figure. And I think he was really torn between his admiration for Western ideals and his deep commitment to his own nation. He envisioned a modern, secular India, but that vision often clashed with the traditionalism and religious fervor of the time. And, you have to think he had to balance this weight of leading a newly independent nation with the immense expectations of a population that was just so eager for change. It's fascinating to think about the internal conflicts that he must have grappled with, trying to reconcile these different forces.
Yeah, and I think his relationship with Gandhi, a man he deeply respected but didn't always agree with, is particularly interesting. Nehru, he recognized Gandhi's moral authority and his power to mobilize the masses, but he also questioned some of Gandhi's more idealistic and traditionalist views.
Then we have Vallabhbhai Patel, this powerful figure within the Congress Party. And he really provided a stark contrast to both Nehru and Gandhi. Known for his pragmatism and organizational skills, Patel was this master strategist. He was really essential in maneuvering this transition of power.
Right. Patel was the ultimate pragmatist. He was focused on consolidating power, building a strong central government, and securing India's interests in the face of partition. And he was willing to make tough decisions, to compromise with rivals, and to use his political acumen to get things done.
He wasn't afraid to clash with Mountbatten or even challenge Gandhi's views when he felt it was necessary. And he understood that the birth of a new nation required a firm hand and a clear vision.
He played a crucial role in unifying the various factions within the Congress Party and in skillfully handling these really delicate negotiations with the hundreds of princely states that existed within India.
Right.
You know, his legacy is often overshadowed by Nehru and Gandhi, but his contributions to shaping independent India were just essential.
And lastly, we have Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League. He was this figure of unwavering determination, advocating for a separate Muslim state. And, you know, it's almost impossible to grasp the sheer willpower of this man, who, while battling a terminal illness, refused to back down from his demand for Pakistan.
Jinnah's story is really one of conviction and the single-minded pursuit of a goal. He truly believed that the interests of Muslims would not be protected in a Hindu-majority, independent India. And despite facing opposition, you know, from within the Muslim community itself and skepticism from the British and the Congress Party, he never wavered.
Yeah. He was a brilliant lawyer and a shrewd politician, and he used his skills to exploit these growing communal tensions and anxieties to build support for his cause. He knew the price of partition, you know, the potential for violence and displacement, but he was willing to accept it as the cost of creating a homeland for Muslims.
And you know, these four individuals, Mountbatten, Nehru, Patel, and Jinnah, they represent this complex tapestry of personalities and ideologies that really shaped the end of the British Raj. They weren't saints. They were flawed individuals with their own ambitions and weaknesses. But they were also leaders who found themselves at the center of this historical moment unlike any other. Their decisions, their compromises, their clashes, they would have these profound and lasting repercussions for millions of people. It's through the lens of these individual stories that we can really start to grasp the magnitude of the events that unfolded. You know, the book goes beyond just recounting historical facts.
Right.
It delves into the personalities, the private conversations, the doubts, the fears, the moments of both brilliance and blunder that ultimately shaped the course of history.
It's incredible to think about Lord Mountbatten arriving in India with all the pomp and ceremony of a viceroy, but then having to face the harsh realities of a nation that's really on the brink of division. The book talks about how he tried to implement what he called Operation Seduction, this idea of charming and persuading his way to a smooth transition.
He truly believed that, you know, his charisma, his negotiating skills could bridge the divides between the Congress Party and the Muslim League. He hosted these lavish dinners, he organized tiger hunts, he even used his royal connections to try and smooth things over. He wanted to leave India with its head held high, with a sense of continuity and order.
But the reality on the ground was far more complex. Communal violence was escalating, political negotiations were deadlocked, and there was this growing sense of urgency to find a solution before the situation descended into complete chaos.
Yeah, the book describes this pivotal moment when Mountbatten receives a report from his intelligence chiefs, and they're outlining the dire situation in Punjab, and they warn him that unless a decision is made soon, the province is going to just erupt in a bloodbath. And it's at this point that he realizes the enormity of the task before him and the limitations of his operations seduction.
He had to make a choice, and he knew that any decision he made would have profound consequences. And I think it's a reminder that even individuals in positions of power, they're often constrained by circumstances, and that sometimes the best they can do is try to mitigate the damage.
And then there's Gandhi, this figure who had become this global icon of peace and resistance. And the book provides these fascinating glimpses into his personal life.
Right.
His unusual habits, his spiritual beliefs, his complex relationships with other leaders.
It's fascinating to learn about his experiments with diet, his practice of celibacy, his commitment to living a simple life. And, you know, these choices weren't just eccentricities.
Right.
They were deeply intertwined with his philosophy of nonviolence and his belief in the power of self-discipline.
He believed that true strength came from within, from conquering one's desires and ego. And he saw his own lifestyle as a way of challenging the materialism and consumerism of the British Empire.
Right.
And of connecting with the suffering of the Indian people.
But the book also reveals how his influence within the Congress Party was waning in these final years of the Raj. The younger generation of leaders, like Nehru and Patel, they respected him, but they were also frustrated by his unwavering idealism.
They saw the need for pragmatism, for compromise, for making difficult choices in order to secure independence and build a stable nation. They weren't always convinced that Gandhi's methods of nonviolent resistance would be enough to achieve these goals.
The book describes this particularly poignant scene where Gandhi, heartbroken over the decision to partition the country, pleads with his colleagues to reconsider. And he argues that partition will inevitably lead to violence and bloodshed. But his pleas fall on deaf ears.
It's a tragic moment that really highlights the limitations of even Gandhi's immense moral authority. He could inspire millions, he could move mountains with his words and actions, but he couldn't single-handedly prevent the forces of history from taking their course.
And then you have Nehru, this towering figure of intellect and charisma, who would go on to become the architect of modern India. The book really captures his complex personality, his Western education, his love for literature and philosophy, his deep commitment to democracy and secularism, but also his sometimes aloof and introspective nature.
Yeah. He was a man of contradictions, shaped by both East and West. He was deeply influenced by his education at Harrow and Cambridge, by the ideals of the Enlightenment, by figures like Voltaire and Rousseau. He envisioned a modern, industrialized India, a nation that could stand as an equal among the developed nations of the world.
But he was also acutely aware of India's unique cultural heritage. Spiritual traditions, its long history. He wanted to forge a new path for India, one that would embrace progress without abandoning its soul.
The book describes him as a man who is both a dreamer and a pragmatist. He can deliver these soaring speeches about freedom and justice, but he could also get bogged down in the nitty-gritty details of policy and administration. He understood that building a new nation required not just vision, but also hard work and attention to detail.
His relationship with Gandhi is particularly fascinating. They had this deep mutual respect, but they also clashed over the direction of the independence movement. Nehru saw the need for political organization, for a modern state apparatus, for engaging in the messy world of realpolitik.
Gandhi, on the other hand, remained committed to his principles of nonviolence and spiritual purity. He believed that the means were as important as the ends, that true liberation could only be achieved through moral transformation, not just political change.
And then there's Patel, a figure who's often overlooked, but who played a critical role in shaping the events leading up to independence.
Patel was the ultimate pragmatist. He was a master organizer, a shrewd negotiator, and a man who understood the levers of power. While Nehru and Gandhi were often caught up in grand visions and moral dilemmas, Patel was focused on getting things done.
He was the one who built the Congress Party into a powerful political machine, capable of mobilizing millions and challenging British rule. And during that tumultuous period of partition, he was instrumental in negotiating with the hundreds of princely states and integrating them into the newly independent India.
It was a task of immense complexity, requiring a combination of diplomacy, political maneuvering, and even military intervention in some cases. Patel was a tough negotiator, not afraid to use pressure or even threats to get what he wanted. But he also understood the importance of compromise and of building consensus.
The book recounts an incident where he clashed with Mountbatten over a policy decision. And Mountbatten was furious, threatening to resign, but Patel stood firm, refusing to back down. And it was a testament to his strength of will and his unwavering commitment to what he believed was best for India.
He was a man of action, not words. He believed in results, not rhetoric. And while his methods were sometimes controversial, there's no denying his crucial role in securing India's independence and shaping the course of its early years as a nation.
And finally, we have Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League and the founding father of Pakistan. He's often portrayed as a rather austere and aloof figure, but the book paints a more nuanced portrait, revealing his complexities and contradictions.
Jinnah was a man of immense intellect and ambition. He was a brilliant lawyer, a sharp dresser, and a charismatic leader who could command the loyalty of millions. But he was also a man who felt deeply alienated from the Hindu-majority Congress Party, and who came to believe that the only way to safeguard the interests of Muslims was to create a separate nation.
The book describes how he was initially a proponent of Hindu-Muslim unity. He even served as a member of the Congress Party for a time. But over the years, he became disillusioned, convinced that the Congress leadership was dominated by Hindu nationalists who would never truly represent the aspirations of Muslims.
He saw the growing communal tensions as evidence of this deep-seated divide.
Right.
And he began to advocate for a separate Muslim state with increasing fervor.
He was a master strategist and a shrewd negotiator. He knew how to exploit the anxieties and fears of his followers, and he was willing to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. His determination in the face of his declining health is truly remarkable.
Right.
The book describes how he continued to work tirelessly, attending meetings, delivering speeches, even as his body was ravaged by tuberculosis.
His dedication to his cause was absolute. He was willing to sacrifice everything, his health, his personal life, even his reputation, to secure a homeland for Muslims.
These four figures, Mountbatten, Gandhi, Nehru, and Jinnah, they each represent a different facet of this complex drama that unfolded during the end of the British Raj. And their stories are intertwined, their fates are interconnected, and their decisions would have reverberations for generations to come.
And it's through their individual journeys, their triumphs and failures, their moments of brilliance and blunder, that we can start to grasp the magnitude of this historical moment and its enduring legacy.
And it's amazing to think about all these moving pieces, right? You have the personalities, the political maneuvering, and then there's this almost cosmic layer added to the story, the anxieties surrounding the date chosen for India's independence.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of dismiss this, from a modern perspective, but in a country as deeply rooted in tradition and spirituality as India astrology, it wasn't just this fringe belief, it held real sway. And the book mentions how even some members of the government, despite their Western education and modern outlook, they were apprehensive about the date chosen for independence, fearing that it was astrologically inauspicious.
It's such a reminder of how different cultural contexts can really influence even the most pivotal decision. Can you imagine receiving a letter from a respected astrologer pleading with you to change the date of independence for the whole nation because the stars weren't aligned favorably? That's exactly the situation that Mountbatten found himself in.
And his response really, I think, speaks volumes about his character and his priorities. He acknowledged the concerns, but ultimately he decided to stick with the original plan.
Yeah.
He saw the practical need to maintain momentum and to avoid further delays that could just exacerbate the already volatile situation.
So against this backdrop of anticipation and anxiety, August 15th arrived, marking the birth of a new nation. And as we know, this momentous day was a study in contrast, this clash between celebration and tragedy.
It's this powerful juxtaposition that the book captures so vividly. On the one hand, you have these jubilant scenes in Delhi, the capital of newly independent India, massive crowds, speeches filled with hope and promise, flag-raising ceremonies, all the pomp and grandeur of a nation stepping onto the world stage.
Right, but at the same time, just a few hundred miles away, a different reality was unfolding in the Punjab, and the violence that had been simmering for months had erupted with terrifying force. Millions of people were on the move, desperately trying to cross these newly drawn borders, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the fear of what lay ahead.
The book doesn't shy away from depicting the horrific brutality of this period. It talks about the massacres, the forced conversions, the widespread sexual violence, the sheer scale of human suffering.
One particularly harrowing episode that stands out is the arrival of the 10 Down Express in Amritsar. And it wasn't carrying passengers, it was carrying corpses, victims of the communal violence that had engulfed the region.
That image of that train filled with the dead, it became this haunting symbol of the human cost of partition.
Yeah.
It's this stark reminder that even in moments of great historical triumph, there are always those who pay the ultimate price.
And amidst this chaos and bloodshed, we see Gandhi's unwavering commitment to peace, his almost singular focus on trying to quell the violence. And he chose to spend Independence Day not celebrating, but fasting and praying for unity.
Gandhi's response, it was both heartbreaking and deeply inspiring. While others were caught up in the euphoria of independence or the frenzy of violence, he remained steadfast in his commitment to nonviolence and reconciliation. His fast was this desperate plea for sanity, a reminder that amidst the hatred and bloodshed, there was still hope for humanity.
It's a testament to his character, his unwavering belief in the power of love and forgiveness, even in the face of unimaginable suffering.
And while he couldn't single-handedly stop the violence, his actions served as this beacon of hope for those who longed for peace. He traveled to the most affected areas. He spoke to both Hindus and Muslims. He risked his own life trying to calm the storm.
And as the dust settled, as the new nations of India and Pakistan began to take shape, there was another powerful symbol that marked the end of an era the departure of the last British troops through the Gateway of India.
The Gateway, once a symbol of British imperial power, it became a stage for this transition of power. It was this visual representation of the end of empire, the closing of a chapter in history.
And it marked not only the end of British rule in India, but also a turning point in world history. The decline of colonialism was gaining momentum, and in the decades to come, many other nations would follow India's path to independence.
Freedom at Midnight does such a remarkable job of weaving together all these threads, the political maneuvering, the personal stories, the symbolic events. It doesn't shy away from the complexities, the contradictions, the triumphs, and the tragedies that marked this pivotal moment in time.
It's a story that stays with you. It challenges you to think about the legacies of empire, the price of freedom, and the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of adversity.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, it's important to remember that the events of 1947, they continue to shape the relationship between India and Pakistan to this day.
Yeah, the partition, the violence, the displacement, all of it has left a deep scar on the region. And understanding this history is really essential for making sense of the political and social dynamics that continue to play out in South Asia.
So as you reflect on the story of India's independence, consider the long-term impact of partition. How do the events of this pivotal moment continue to shape the political and social landscape of South Asia today? It's a question worth pondering, a reminder that the past is never truly behind us and that history continues to shape our present.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Freedom at Midnight. We hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity and left you with a deeper understanding of this complex and fascinating period in history.